Hello and welcome. In this video, we're going to take a look at Microsoft Teams webinars, which will allow us to engage with people in our organization or from outside our organization through a webinar format. We'll be able to create a registration page and send that out in advance of the webinar, collect information that can help us shape the webinar, and then follow up at the end by gathering data about what happened during the webinar. This is a wonderful new feature in Microsoft Teams that expands the size of our audience, how we reach that audience, and how we engage that audience. Let's go have a look at how we can do that on a Windows PC. Normally when I'm in a meeting like the Outdoor Adventure Club here, and I go to meet, I'm going to see that I can either meet now with members of my team, or I can schedule a meeting with members of my team. And the key phrase there is, with members of my team. What if I want people across my organization, or outside of my organization, to attend training or an information session? Well, webinars, that's how I want to do that. And previously in Microsoft Teams, I would have had to have added those people to the Microsoft Teams as a guest, sent them the link to the meeting, and it would have been a bit of a hassle. But now what I can do is create a pre-registration form where I can collect information from them before the webinar, and then I can follow up with them once the webinar is over. Let's have a look at how to do that. The key here is I have to go to my calendar. And once I'm in my calendar, I can go to the new meeting here, and you'll see that I now have the webinar and the live event meeting types. I can still schedule a regular meeting from here, but the webinar will allow me to have people across the organization and from outside the organization that aren't necessarily members of a specific team. Whereas a live event, that's for large presentations where I want people to tune in to watch. Let's do the webinar. When I do the webinar, you'll notice that it looks exactly like a regular meeting setup, except I now have this option to require or create a registration form. And you'll see here I can make it for everyone or just from people in my organization. So I do have some control as to who has to fill out the registration form. So I'm going to go to the registration form because this is going to be maybe part of a webinar that anybody can sign up for. And I'm going to upload an image here. Now, you do want to have a nice branded image, but I just have a generic image that I'm going to drop in here to demonstrate that I can scale in, zoom in, move around, and create a nice image that's going to be part of the registration form that I'm going to send out. I'm going to make this particular meeting from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. and it's going to be very important that you remember that time, because what I'm doing here is I'm not creating the meeting. I'm creating the registration form. So this is what the user is going to see when I send it out to them, whichever mechanism I use, through an email campaign, Microsoft Dynamics, a LinkedIn campaign, a Facebook campaign, whatever it is. I'm going to get them to click on this link and register for the webinar. I can go in here and I put in the time that the webinar is going to be, and then I can put in information about that webinar. Let me just grab some text that I wrote here, and I'm just going to copy this. And you'll notice that when I copy this in here, or paste it in there, I still need to go in and format this a little bit, because this is what's going to be seen by anybody who's going to receive the link to register. I can add speaker information to entice people to come here. So I'm going to say that somebody named Hank Dahlberg, an expert hiker, is going to be presenting here, and I could put in a bio, all about Hank. Now, of course, you want to make this as detailed as possible to entice people to actually sign up for your webinar. And here they'll put in their first name, their last name, and their email. And I can also add in, say, a question, a custom question. I could also ask information about, where they're from and such. But let's do a custom question, and I'll give them a multiple choice question in here. And my question will be, how experienced are you with hiking? So we'll say, how experienced are you with hiking? And the first choice will be expert level. And the second choice will be intermediate level. And then the final choice will be beginner. Now, of course, you can refine those, put whatever you want in there. So you can go in and put whatever information you think is important to gather before the event occurs. So now we have this nice little form, and I'll go ahead and save that. Now I've saved the form, and I'm going to copy the registration link. Now at this point, the registration link will not work because I have to go in, and we'll just close down the registration form. And then what I need to do is actually create the meeting itself. So plan a hike meeting. And it's really important to realize that this is sort of a two-step process. And I'll put in Frank in here. So I'll put in my name in here, and then I'll go in, and this is where it's important to know exactly what times I put in the registration to make sure I put the same times into the meetings. So you want to make sure that the meeting and the registration form match. In fact, I might even want to go in here and paste the information in here, but I'll just, for now, say hike plan. This is what will show up on a calendar, but you really should cut and paste the same information in there. And now I've got this in here, and I will send that in. That will now be scheduled here. So we have this plan a hike meeting. And now if I go into a browser, and I'll just choose a different browser. So let's say my participant receives this link through an email, or they receive this link through LinkedIn, whatever it may be. I'm going to go in there, and when they paste and go to this link, you'll notice that they get a form to fill out. And this form will allow them to go through. They can read about the webinar, get interested in it, and they'll put some information in here. So let's say, for example, I'll put in the information here of Deanna, and we'll put in the name Prince. That's Wonder Woman. And we can put in an email address in there. And let's say she's going to use her personal email, Deanna at Amazon. I better not put in Amazon. I'll put AmazonIsland.com. And she is an expert at hiking and planning hiking. So we'll register her. She'll now receive an email that indicates she's been registered for the webinar. She's ready to go. Now, as the organizer, one of the things I might wish to do is get people excited about the webinar before it actually happens. So maybe a day or two before the webinar, I'll send them a reminder email. I'll say thank you for registering, or if there's people that haven't registered yet, don't forget that there's a webinar, please register. You can manage this because you're going to have information about everybody who's registered. So I'll go and click the registration download link, and there's no bells or whistles here, but it did download. So if I go into my downloads, you'll notice that I have a meeting registration plan that's downloaded, which can be opened up in Excel. Now I went through and I added a number of different registrants for this particular webinar so that you could see exactly what it looks like. And this gives me a huge amount of ability to work with the data in advance and after the webinar has occurred. So for example, I can go in here and see that I have, an intermediate hiker, we have a few beginners and an expert. Maybe I divide these folks into groups for things that I want them to do in advance. Maybe this is something where I can modify some of my webinar delivery so I can concentrate more on beginner information. Maybe what I want to do is contact the experts and say, look, we have 80% of the people here are going to be beginners. Maybe you want to register for my advanced hiking webinar, or just be aware that the content might be below the level that you're currently at. So we have a lot of ability to get information before the webinar even begins and to get people excited for the webinar in advance. Now what's really interesting is, of course, after the webinar is over, I can download the attendance list. I can do a comparison, see who registered and didn't make it, so I can send them a link maybe on information that they may have missed. There's so many things I can do because I now have data that allows me to work with the webinar meeting type. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this video was useful. If it was, like, subscribe, comment, and most importantly, share this with colleagues that might benefit from this information in your school or in your organization.